Hey everybody, Kirsten here, and today I'm going to be doing a book talk for you. I have decided that I was going to do a book talk for a new YA fantasy release, and that is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I know I said I was going to focus more on romance on my channel, but I like to kind of switch it up a little bit every now and then, so I thought I'd do a book talk for this particular book. And the reason why is because I have a lot of mixed feelings about it. So I feel like if I just sit here and talk about it for a little while, I might actually come up with an actual do I like this or do I not like this kind of a book. This book takes place in a fairy realm, and it's not the kind of fairy that I'm accustomed to in the YA fantasy genre. So when I think of fairies in the YA fantasy genre, I think of Sarah J. Maas. I think of that high fae, and her fairies to me remind me more of like the elves in the Tolkien realm, like very tall, regal creatures, you know, kind of human-esque, but immortal and have like some special skills, things like that. So that's the kind of fairy or fae that I think of when I think of YA fantasy. This is a more of a traditional fairy story. So I remember when I was in 3rd grade, I had this fairy encyclopedia, and it was like the fairies of Ireland. And so it had all of these different kinds of fairies in it. And that's kind of what this is like. So everyone's like a different color. They have like animal features. They have special skills, you know. Like there's just different kinds of fairies throughout this entire story. No single fairy looks alike to the next one. So it is kind of like that traditional folklore fairy kind of a story. So going into that, just know that going into it, it's not like the fae that we think of when we think of Sarah J. Maas. It's a traditional folklore fairy. This story had its highs and its lows for me. So the main protagonist is a very morally great character. So Jude is our main protagonist, and she has her twin sister Taryn and her older sister Viv. Their mother was from the fairy world. She was married to this man named Marduk, who's a general in the fairy world. Their older sister Viv, she is a child of her mother and Marduk, and she runs away to the mortal realm, takes her own death so that Marduk doesn't come looking for her. And when in the mortal realm, she ends up having Jude and Taryn. So they're actual full mortal girls. So essentially what happens is Marduk comes, finds them, kills their mom and their dad, and takes them back to the fairy world. And so this entire book is them as teenagers now in the fairy world, trying to find their place and seeing where they fit. And there's a lot that goes on in it. There's a lot of politics. There's a lot of kind of what goes on in like this particular fairy court between the succession of the throne, kind of the war between the different fairy lands and things like that, which is good. I like that. I like that part of fantasy novels when they actually dive a little bit into the politics and the monarchy of these fantasy worlds. I thought it was really interesting. That was like one of the most interesting parts of this book for me. Now, it was very hit or miss throughout the entire book. I thought the pacing was really off. So the start of the book starts out very action-packed, you know, with them being spirited away to the fairy world, and then there's like this lull where it's like them just kind of, sure, she just kind of describes this fairy world, which, you know, its world building is absolutely necessary, obviously, but I didn't like the imagery that she was coming across when she was describing this fairy world. Don't get me wrong, I love descriptions of gowns and hair and how the fairies like live and dress, but I mean, it wasn't necessary to this storyline at all to have, you know, a two-page description of the dresses they're wearing to a ball and things like that. Like, I thought that was a little excessive and unneeded through the story and the storyline. You know, and it was just really off. So there would be those lulls, and then there'd be like an action sequence, and then there would be another lull, and then an action sequence, and then it could have been distributed better, is essentially what I'm trying to get at. And the actual like story itself, I liked the storyline. I liked where it was going. I loved Jude's story. She's a morally gray character. You know, she's trying to navigate herself, trying to prove herself to these immortal creatures that are surrounding her every day, trying to remind her of her mortality. You know, her sister, Taryn, her twin sister, it was interesting to see their dynamic as the story progressed, as Taryn wants that love story, wants just to have that traditional female role in this fairy world, fall in love, that fetishized human interaction with the fairies is essentially what Taryn wants out of life. And Jude wants more than that. She wants to actually prove herself that she is strong and capable, just like these fairies are. And her father, being Marduk, who is a general, he ends up, you know, teaching her how to do all of the like battle and strategy and all these things. So she's very battle centered. She wants to be a knight. She wants to, you know, be strong and be fierce and be this mortal and prove herself among these fairies. It is, I liked that struggle with her, trying to figure out, you know, I am mortal, but do I want to be? I don't want to be. I want to be fairy, but I want to keep my humanity, kind of a thing. And the most interesting character to me in this book was actually kind of the character that was least developed throughout the entire story, and that's Prince Carden. So whenever you search anything about this book, you're gonna see tons of fan art, tons of things about Prince Carden. He's gonna be, like, he's obviously the love interest throughout the book. Doesn't seem that way, but it's obviously gonna progress that way. It's a hate to love kind of a thing that's gonna happen. Right now they hate each other, and that's fine, and I like it. But he was very poorly developed. I wanted to see more from him. I wanted her to dive into him a little bit more because he was very interesting, and he seems like he's going to be a very complex character, and I'm really interested in knowing more about him, but we didn't get a lot of him. It was a lot of him just being mean to her, and which is great. It's fine. She doesn't know much about him yet, so it makes sense why we don't know a lot about him, but as the story progressed and they spend more time together, he was still very much a shallow character. And I don't want him to be a shallow character. And I'm really scared that as the series goes on, he's going to continue to be a shallow character. And I'm really hoping that with the next book, that doesn't happen. That he shines a little bit more, that he has more of a spotlight throughout the story. I don't want to say definitively that it's like a 5-star book for me, because it's not. I'm still kind of on the fence, but that's why I wanted to talk about this a little bit so I can get my thoughts out there a little bit more before I sit down and write a real review about this book, just because I'm still kind of reeling from all the information and from the world building and all of that. So I'm still sitting on the fence, but I enjoyed the story itself. If some of you like me can get past some of the fantastical descriptions that are very unnecessary throughout the book, then definitely I would recommend reading this. If you don't like fairies, like I know there's a lot of readers out there like me who don't like traditional fairy stories, this one might not be for you, just because it is very, very much like fairies can't lie, wear rowan berries, and you can't be enchanted by fairies. It's like, it's very much folklore fairies. So if that's not something that you're going to be into, I wouldn't recommend this book. But if you do like very morally gray characters and you don't mind that traditional fairy story, then definitely pick this one up, because I think that as the story progresses and as the series progresses, it's going to get better. But everybody, thank you so much for watching my book talk on The Cruel Prince and for all of my ramblings. I didn't write anything down this time, so I just kind of went with it and winged it. So next week I am going to be doing a diversity in romance book talk. So I'm going to be talking a lot about a lot of different diverse romance novels out there, which aren't very easy to find. So I've been taking the time to read a lot more diverse romance so that I have some good options for all of you that don't want that typical white man, white female romance novel. So keep a lookout for that book talk next week. But everyone, thank you so much for watching, and you have a good rest of your week.